Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Guten Tag, meine Damen und Herren, and willkommen im DCL podcast, your podcast for Disney Cruise Line history, trip reports, and travel planning. Well, welcome back. We are moving on to episode 24, or episode number 24 of the DCL podcast. In February of 2007, Disney Cruise Line announced that it had commissioned 2 new ships. The first steel cut for scroll work on the ship's hull was in March of 2009 at the Meyer Werft shipyard in Papenburg, Germany. Later that month, the 2 ships were named. The Disney Dream, set to enter service first, followed by its sister vessel, the Disney Fantasy. The design of the Disney Dream was unveiled at a press conference in New York City on October 29, 2009. The keel of the Disney Dream was laid on August 19, 2009. On June 1, 2010, the final section of the ship, the bow, was put into place, completing the exterior, with work continuing on the interior of the ship. Float-out took place on October 30, 2010, and the Disney Dream had her maiden voyage on January 26, 2011. Disney Cruise Line took possession of Disney Dream on December 8, 2010. She arrived in Port Canaveral, Florida on January 4, 2011. Disney Dream was christened on January 19, 2011 by Jennifer Hudson, who began her career as an entertainer, believe it or not, on the Disney Wonder. Disney Dream's maiden voyage began on January 26, 2011, calling on Nassau, the Bahamas, and Disney's private island, Castaway Cay. 1 year later, in 2012, her sister ship, the Disney Fantasy, joined the Disney Cruise Line Company. Just 2 months ago, during the annual notice to shareholders, Bob Iger made the announcement that Disney Cruise Line, on top of the 2 ships that they had commissioned Meyer Werft and Papenburg to build, was adding on a 3rd ship. When I heard that, I really got excited, just like the rest of you, and I started doing a lot of research on the Meyer Werft company online. And through that research, I was lucky enough to make the acquaintance of Florian Feimann. He is one of the tour guides of the Meyer Werft company, and he was gracious enough to come on and record a show with me just a week ago, all about the history of Meyer Werft, the shipbuilding process, and a little bit about the Disney ships as well. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of information yet on the 3 ships coming, but when they do come, Florian's agreed to come back on and kind of update us as we start getting more information from there. So with all that said, let's set sail for Papenburg, Germany, where I'm inviting you to sit back, relax, and enjoy tonight's show all about the Meyer Werft Company with Florian Feimann. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, and I'm really excited today. We are going to go all the way over to Papenburg, Germany, and I have a special guest on today, Florian Feimann. How are you doing this evening, Florian?
Yeah, hi, Steve. I'm fine. Thanks for having me here in the DCL podcast. I'm happy to tell you a little bit about Meyer Werft and cruise ship building, so especially the new Disney Cruise Line project that we can build in my hometown.
Yes, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Meyer Werft, is the company that built the Disney Dream and the Disney Fantasy, and they came online in 2011 and 2012, and recently announced Disney is going back to Meyer Werft, a very strong shipyard who has produced ships for Norwegian Cruise Line, Disney, and many others. That's correct, right, Florian?
Yeah, I think most of the cruise companies around the world have at least one ship that was built by Meyer Werft. Uh-huh. And most of them come back, so they seem to produce quite good quality.
Yeah. And so Disney, once again, is teamed up with Meyer Werft, and they're bringing out their new ships in 2021, 2022, and 2023. And before we start, let's just talk about, where is Papenburg, Germany? What part of the country is it?
In the northwest of Germany, near the Dutch border. It's a small town, 30-something thousand inhabitants, and it's not located at the North Sea, but south the North Sea, around 50 kilometers. So we don't build the ships at the coast, but they have to be brought down the River Ems, a small river, and then they are in the ocean. So it's not quite the perfect location for a shipyard.
And there's a show over here in the U.S. called Mighty Ships, and I think it's done by the National Geographic Channel. And I watched, there's a great one. You can go online and see it for anybody who's interested. And they show the building of the Norwegian Breakaway. And it's a two-part show where they show kind of the whole start and the build of the Breakaway. And then the second show is actually sailing it down the River Ems and into the North Sea and for their initial workouts before it went into service. And if anybody's interested, I really highly recommend you go to that to see it. Also, you can go to the Meyer Werft website, and there's a lot of pictures so you can see what Florian's talking about as far as sailing down the rivers, because that's just an amazing sight, isn't it, as they go down?
It's amazing. It's unique around the world, and it's a small river with a giant cruise ship on it, just a few meters of water left and right, and thousands of people gather around and watch the ship going to the sea.
Yeah, it's some really fascinating pictures. So, well, before we talk about the company itself, let's talk a little bit about you. How did you get involved, or what was your influence to get involved with Meyer Werft?
Yeah, I am from Papenburg, and so I saw all the cruise ships in my childhood, and I got interested in it. Even thought about becoming a employee of Meyer Werft, becoming a shipbuilding engineer or naval architect or something like this. Eventually, I started studying cruise tourism management, so it's more the economic side of the cruise industry. It's also in northern Germany, and next to my studies, I am a tour guide at Meyer Werft. So they operate a visitor center, which is run by the Papenburg Marketing, and I'm involved all around this tourist visitor center at the shipyard.
And so you get to escort them actually through the shipyard so that as you take the tour, you can kind of see the ships being built?
Yeah. So the usual tour is through the visitor center, and you get to see into the building docks. You're not actually around, but you have your glasses and windows, wide windows that you can look through and watch all the workers do their work.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I'm sure for safety reasons you can't actually be on the shipyard itself, but what an amazing sight to be able to see the ships being built. Which one's being built right now, or which one are they working on right now?
We are building, or Meyer Werft, I always say we, but I'm not actually an employee of Meyer Werft. They're building Norwegian Bliss, which will be delivered in April to Norwegian Cruise Line, and also Aida Nova for the German cruise line Aida. That will actually be the largest cruise ship ever built in Papenburg.
Wow. How many people will that hold? Do you know?
Up to 6,500 people.
Okay, so for those of you, just to put it in perspective from Disney's side, the Dream and the Fantasy hold about 4,000. So that's 2,500 more people. So to kind of give you kind of a size difference. And the Bliss, I believe, is going to begin its inaugural sailings with Norwegian up in Alaska over here on the West Coast, and it's going to be it's specially designed. A lot of window spaces I think I've seen for the for people that sail on it to just take in the sights of Alaska as you go up there.
Yeah, they have lots of observation lounges. It's amazing. That ship is perfectly built for Alaska, definitely. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And besides your job as a student and a tour guide, you also are involved with a travel blog too. Could you talk a little bit about that?
That actually started because I am a tour guide at Meyer Werft, and Hubert, who started the blog, came to visit me. We met each other at Twitter, and he asked me to come to Meyer Werft and blog about it. And I made all the arrangements, and he came. And a few months later, I got invited to ship visits from Norwegian and Sea Cloud and different cruise lines. I was always interested in photography, and had all these photos, and I asked him to blog about all these cruise ships, and he said yes, he liked what I was writing, and here I am, writing for the Traveler blog. So if you ever want to read some German cruise reviews, go to travelerblog.eu, and you find all the photos that I make.
It's a beautiful site. Even if you don't speak German, I've been trying to read it a little bit. I we were talking before the show. I studied German a little bit back a long time ago, so I've been kind of trying to work on my German a little bit. But even if you don't speak German, the pictures that Florian is talking about are absolutely beautiful. So I encourage you to go and take a look at his traveler blog site as well. Anything else you want to tell us about yourself before we jump into the history of Meyer Werft?
No, I don't think so. All important. Well, I could tell you a few things, but all important has already been said, I think. just please excuse me if my English is not so fluent. I'm just not used to speaking English anymore.
Oh, no, you're doing excellent. I really appreciate it. So let's jump in a little bit about the history. Meyer Werft was started, it's an old company, and tell us a little about when it was founded and kind of the history of how they've gotten to where they are today building cruise ships.
It's a long story, and Meyer Werft was founded in 1795. So they have quite a long history, and they were founded by Wilhelm Rolf Meyer, the first owner of the shipyard, and today they are run by the seventh generation of the Meyers. So they're family-owned and run by family members. Actually, they should have called the company Jansen Werft, because when Wilhelm Rolf Meyer came to Papenburg, his name was not Wilhelm Rolf Meyer, but Wilhelm Rolf Jansen. And the priest back then in Papenburg said, well, I do have enough Jansens already in my town. I don't want you to be named Jansen, but we can have some Meyers. And then they got the name Meyer. That's official. It's not a joke.
It's interesting.
And he was a shipbuilder back then, and he started his own company and started building wooden ships. So they were quite small, around 10 meters in length, and they were built to transport the peat that was quarried in Papenburg and all around, and bring it to the North Sea or to the Netherlands. And that's why Papenburg has more than 40 kilometers of channels in the town. So they were used to bring the peat to the River Ems and then to the Netherlands. And then the company was always given to the firstborn son. And in the third generation, it was the turn of Josef Lambert Meyer. And he actually was the second son of his father and was set to become kind of the dealer for the wood that his older brother needed for the wooden ships. But he wanted to become a shipbuilder. And then his dad said, okay, you can become a shipbuilder, but go away. I don't want to see you. And then he went to New York and Boston and Baltimore and got in touch with the iron shipbuilding, which wasn't present in Germany back then. And in 1874, Meyer Werft started iron shipbuilding in Papenburg. And there is a legend that, well, first of all, I have to say, back then there were 23 shipyards in Papenburg. Today we only have Meyer Werft. And there's a legend saying when Josef Lambert introduced his idea of building iron ships, all the other shipyard owners gathered at the channel, took an iron horseshoe and a piece of wood, threw it into the channel, and of course the horseshoe would sink and the wood would be on the surface. And they laughed at Wilhelm Rolf Meyer and said, hey, why do you want to build ships from a material that sinks into the water? And of course he knew that it would work because he knew it from the US. And so he started iron construction in Papenburg and trained all the workers to work with iron and not wood anymore. And that's why the company survived, I think. Innovation. Every generation of Meyer brought some innovation into the company and changed the business model a little bit. And that's why the company survived, in my opinion.
So initially they were, as you said, building wooden ships kind of for transportation. When did they make the transition as they got bigger and older to start building cruise ships?
That was actually in the 1980s. So in the 50s, 60s, 70s, they gathered knowledge in iron shipbuilding, of course, and started to construct bulkers, fish trawlers, ferries, and so on. And in the 80s, they started with the cruise ship building. And the reason was they had an order for gas tankers that was too big for the old shipyard that was located in the city center of Papenburg. And then they decided to build a new one directly at the River Ems. And they had this new facilities and everything was big enough to build bigger ships, and they had opportunities to go into new fields. And then they found out that the cruise ship industry was growing very well and that it would be a lucrative business. And so they got an order for the first cruise ship in 1984, which was back then the Homeric for Homelines. Actually, this ship is called Thompson Dream today. It's still in operation. And then they started building cruise ships. That ship was not built in the covered dry docks that we have today, but outside. And it was launched sideways. So it was built on land and launched sideways. It was a gross tonnage of 42,000, so quite small compared to the ships we're building today here in Papenburg. So we're around 170 and 180,000 gross tonnage. And back then it was the largest vessel launched sideways, the Homeric. That is how cruise ship building started in Papenburg. And actually Homeric, quite a funny story, is the only cruise ship that returned to Papenburg.
Really?
Actually, yeah, because all the maintenance and classification and so on is usually done in other shipyards because you have to bring the ship back up the River Am. And this would work with ships of the size we're building today. But back then it was possible because Homelines sold the ship to Holland America Line. And they converted it, or wanted it to be converted into the Westerdam and lengthened by 40 meters. Okay. And they called Bernard Meyer, our senior CEO, and said, hey, we want to lengthen it because they're missing two things on this ship: tennis courts.
You can't sail without a tennis court, can you?
Yeah. So they brought it back to Papenburg, cut it into half, put 40 meters into the middle of the ship, welded it back together, and 3 months later the ship was lengthened by 40 meters and called Westerdam. Yeah, that's quite a legendary story in Papenburg.
Wow.
Yeah, and then more and more cruise lines ordered ships at Meyer Werft. So Celebrity Cruises, for example, P&O, Star Cruises were the largest customers in the 90s. And then Royal Caribbean came. Radiance Class was the first ships we built for them in Papenburg. NCL almost got their entire fleet from Papenburg. So I think 11 of 13 ships or 10 of 13 ships were built in Papenburg from NCL. So they're quite an important customer, although they decided to order their new ship generation in Italy. But they will come back, I'm sure.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised by that when we were on our latest cruise on the Getaway, which was built there in Papenburg. And you've been on that ship as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been on it. I did an internship for Norwegian Cruise Line in business development. And when the ship was in the Baltics this season, had a call in Germany every 9 days, and we had lots of ship visits, and I organized them and did them. So I had a few times on the Norwegian Getaway as well, yeah.
Huh, I wonder if you were on there when we were there. I'll have to go back and do the dates. Maybe we could talk about it afterwards. But we went through Warnemünde on that 9-day cruise on the Getaway. So I wonder if you were there when we were on it.
Yeah, possible.
Possibly. So now they've gotten into building cruise ships. How long does it take generally? I'm sure it varies on the size and what the customer wants, but how long does it take to build one of these ships? So how many are they building at one time?
In general, or in average, we say that it takes 3 years to build a cruise ship when you start with a blank sheet of paper.
Okay. And
this is divided into 1.5 years of planning, developing, construction work. The other half, 1.5 years, is the actual construction of the ship. And that means In the 2 covered dry docks, we are currently building 4 ships at any time in different statuses. So 2 ships are always in one building dock, although I have to say that the smaller building dock is not used for building whole cruise ships right now, because all the cruise ships on order are too big to be built there.
Okay.
There's one exception. Saga Cruises ordered 2 ships that can be built in that building dock. And we have 1 ship in steel cutting and 1 ship in block construction. So there are always 4 ships in different statuses, and that makes it possible to deliver 1 cruise ship every 6 months.
So getting into the actual building of it, about 3 years from paper to the time it's floating out of the where it's constructed, how does the design process work? I'm guessing that each individual cruise line has the things that they want built in the ship, kind of like we're talking about with the Norwegian Bliss. They added a lot of window areas and public areas so that they can see the sites up in Alaska. Who designs it? How much does Meyer Werft, how much are they involved with the design process? Or is it an outsider that designs it and then Meyer Werft builds it? Does that make sense?
Well, actually, Meyer Werft is responsible for the whole design, be it the architecture of the ship itself, or, for example, the look of a restaurant, the look and feel of a restaurant, or the cabins. And they actually propose it to the cruise lines, and they say yes or no.
Okay.
That's the usual process. I'm pretty sure with Disney Cruise Line, it's not that way, because they bring a lot into the blueprints, of course, and the drawings, because they have quite good imagination, and they have all the experts, and they have all their internal rules and corporate design things and so on, and it all has to fit into this whole Disney environment. So I think Disney will be a little more special. But for example, with the water slides they have on board, this is done by Meyer Werft. They know the suppliers and the specialist, the expert that can do this.
Which kind of leads me to my next question. How much is actually built there at Meyer Werft? Whereas I was watching when they were building the Norwegian Breakaway, the azipods, I believe, were actually constructed. And the azipods are the giant propellers that control the ship. And maybe I'm not explaining that exactly right, but they're kind of usually I think they have 2 on board. And they're the giant propellers below the ship that have the propellers, and they can move 360 degrees, and that's how they maneuver it, or part of the way they maneuver it and push the ship forward. But I think those were designed in Italy, I believe. Am I right on that?
Well, that is partly correct. You explained perfectly right how they work, but they're constructed and designed in Finland, usually.
Okay, Finland.
Yeah, but the stabilators on the sides of the ship that are built and constructed in Italy. Yeah, that's right.
So parts of the ship are constructed elsewhere, but the majority of it is constructed there at Meyer Werft, and everything is kind of put together there before they float it out.
Yeah. Okay. So when the ship floats out, it's 98% ready for operation. And maybe your bed sheets are not there, or your spoons and so on are not there, but the ship is almost ready when it leaves the shipyard. Although Meyer Werft itself does only around 25% of the work. Everything else is subcontracted. Around 900 companies are involved in building a cruise ship, and that is from propulsion systems, or all the attractions you have, the entertainment you have, carpets, all that is done by subcontractors and suppliers. And Meyer Werft actually does the project management. They buy it from the suppliers, they coordinate how they work, when they work, they do all the work together with the architectures and engineers of the cruise lines, and they make sure that everything is done in time.
It kind of like the airlines then too. So Boeing and Airbus make the planes. They're kind of the project managers as well, but there's a lot of smaller companies that provide products that are actually put onto the plane. So kind of the same thing.
Yeah, that's quite similar.
Yeah, similar industries. Well, let's talk about just what it's like to work there for the people that are building the ships. Is this something that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Is something always going on, or what's it like for the workers there?
Usually they work in 2 shifts, early shift and late shift, and from Monday to Friday. And usually the shift that starts in around 2 or 2:30 p.m., they do logistics. So they make sure that the shift that starts next morning can do their work. There are parts of the shipyard that are run 24/7. For example, the laser center. Yes, we do have lasers at Meyer Werft.
Wow.
Actually, we have one of the largest laser welding and laser hybrid welding facilities in the world. That's actually where the ship is born, because that's where all the steel arrives at the shipyard and is either cut into pieces or welded together to form sections and blocks. That maybe I can talk a little bit of the way that ships are built in Papenburg.
Perfect.
You might know Lego blocks, right?
Uh-huh.
And most of the engineers of Meyer Werft played with Lego when they were children, and they just translated it into shipbuilding. So we build small units and bring them together, and these units again we bring it together to form even larger units. And we start with steel plates. They become sections, for example, with walls that are mounted and welded together, and all the pipes, for example, or AC equipment, air conditioning equipment is already assembled in these quite early status. And this is assembly, is an assembly line. So this runs 24/7 and makes sure that I think every 4 hours, one section is ready to be brought to the production facilities in the building docks. And 8 to 12 of these sections that are one deck form one block. And these blocks can be up to 800 tons in weight. And around 85 of these blocks form one cruise ship. I just told you that we are having 2 ships in one building hall, in the larger building hall, which is 504 meters in length and 125 meters wide, just to give you an idea of the dimensions at Meyer Werft. And we actually have one ship on the opposite side where the door is. So we have around 140 meters between the ship that's going to be delivered next and the door where it will flow out. And we use the space to build so-called mega blocks. These mega blocks are made out of the blocks that we use everywhere in the shipyard, and they are based on so-called floating engine room units. And these engine room units contain all the technical equipment, the main engines, the generators for electricity, propulsion systems, and so on. And these are being built actually in Warnemünde, where you've been, at Neptun Werft, which is also part of the Meyer Werft group. So the family also owns this shipyard, and they construct it there, build it there, and bring it to Papenburg through the Kiel Channel and the River Ems to the shipyard. And then we put on all these hotel blocks, your cabins, and so on. And when this is ready, we float it out, bring it to the harbor of the shipyard, and then we use the space again for another mega block, also 140 meter long. And then when this mega block is finished, the ship behind it is also finished, and we float out the second mega block, we float out the ship, and then the building hall is ready for the next ship to be constructed. So we float in again the 2 mega blocks, weld them together, and then the bow and the aft of the ship are constructed with blocks. And 6 weeks later, from the outside, the ship already looks finished. Yeah, I hope this was kind of understandable for everyone. It's quite complex if you have never seen it. So I hope everyone understands a little bit what I was talking about.
I think your analogy with the Legos is perfect because, once again, if you go to the Mighty Ships video where they're showing the Breakaway being built, it's just like, as you said, it's just gigantic blocks that are put together, and within those blocks, there's other little blocks. So like each stateroom, so each one of the staterooms is built separately, and then that is put in on top, or one after the other, on each floor. So it really is very similar to building things with Legos. And if you're interested in this, I totally encourage you to go to, you can either Google it, I'm sure you can find some videos on YouTube, but once again, that Mighty Ships video with the breakaway build, it's an amazing sight to see, and it'll kind of put it more into perspective from what Florian is talking about.
Yeah, I also highly recommend to watch it. It's amazing. Although some processes have changed since Norwegian Breakaway, but get an idea, a quite good idea of how the shipyard is run today. Yeah, and where did I stop? Yeah, the mega blocks are being flowed in again. Then we have the space again in front of the door of the building hall and can start with the next ship again. And that's why we all have this prefabrication processes going on, so that we have always the next ship ready for the next construction step, so to speak.
Well, excellent. Let's talk a little bit about the Disney ships. We were talking before we started to record this, that you were saying that, okay, so usually it takes about 3 years to build a ship, and you said that it took about 7 years for Disney to pen the first contract to build the Disney Dream. Can you tell us any stories about that? And
it was quite a complex project, because in 2000, Meyer Werft and Disney Cruise Line started negotiating that Disney would like to order some cruise ships. And in 2007, they signed the actual contract. Then they started constructing these ships and building these ships, which was quite complicated because of the different technical innovations of these projects. So, for example, these magical portholes were completely new to the industry, and of course that logically completely new for Meyer Werft, and it was quite complex to find the right supplier which could deliver the amount of portholes or displays needed, and all the software construction and so on. And I, for example, know that usually the U.S. Coast Guard only allows you 3 different colors for your lifeboats. There's one yellow, one particular orange, and one particular red that you can use for your lifeboats, for example. And Disney wanted to use their yellow, so the particular Disney yellow for the lifeboats. And it was quite challenging to make that possible, for example, to get all the paperwork and so on, yeah. These are quite interesting stories. I know that the funnels, for example, were painted with a special technique, and they had painters from Mexico that flew to Meyer Werft in Papenburg just to paint the funnels.
Huh. What was different about it, or do you know, or just out of curiosity?
I don't know what was the reason to do that. I have no idea.
Yeah. And for the magic portholes, for those of you who may have not, which actually I have never been, our family has never been on the Dream or the Fantasy, the portholes that Florian is talking about are in the staterooms where do not actually look out over the water. So the inside staterooms, Disney has put these magical portholes in where it's a video of the outside, and then every now and then something kind of magical happens, as far as like maybe a character will swim by or something like that. So it's an actual video of what you're seeing outside, but then some animation thrown in with it. So for those of you that have a inside stateroom, it kind of gives you a feeling of having an outside stateroom and looking outside, right?
Yeah, that's it. And this technology was actually used by Meyer Werft to create these virtual balconies that they delivered with the Quantum class ship. So it's the next evolutionary step, and I'm very curious what they will show us on the new 3 ships.
Have you actually seen those virtual balconies? Those are on, so the Quantum class ships are with Royal Caribbean. Have you actually seen those working?
Yeah, I've been in one mock-up cabin at the Meyer Werft, and it's fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether I would like to actually cruise in an inside cabin with a virtual balcony. But the technology behind it, it's amazing. It's really near an actual view, yeah.
So any other fun stories that you can kind of think of surrounding maybe the Dream or the Fantasy when they were built?
So maybe not fun stories, but there are a lot of interesting stories. For example, Disney Cruise Line had quite a huge commitment into the whole community of Papenburg. So, for example, they went to kindergartens and primary schools and gave them materials and educational stuff. And that was new. That has never been there in Papenburg, that a cruise line has such a great commitment to the whole city. They, for example, had their own booth at the Christmas market in the city center.
Really?
That actually is one of the reasons why most Papenburgers do like Disney Fantasy and Disney Dream most. They see so many cruise ships, but when you ask 100 Papenburgers, which are your favorite cruise ships, 98 will say Disney.
Wow, so they really kind of embraced, the Disney company really kind of embraced the Papenburg surrounding area and really kind of tried to bring everybody together with the ships that they built.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And, well, I have one more fun story, which is actually quite funny, because there is Admiral Donald, right?
Oh, yes.
I think it's Admiral. And there is one statue of him in the visitor center and one on Disney Dream. And they were both delivered to the shipyard at the same time. And the statue that was made for the visitor centers was plastic. And the one that was actually made for the ship was, I think, bronze. And they just switched the statues, and nobody noticed, actually. But last year, or this year, I don't know, when Disney Fantasy was in dry dock, they noticed, and they had to fly the actual statue from Papenburg to the ship.
so the Fantasy was floating around with the plastic one, huh?
Yeah.
Until just recently. That's funny. I like that.
We were not happy about this in the visitor center.
Well, did they at least give you the plastic one back so that you still have it? Okay.
They did.
Good. That's funny. Well, cool. Were people excited? I know it's a little ways off, 2021 for the first ship to be launched, but they'll be beginning to start to build it here soon, I would guess. Are people excited about that there in Papenburg?
Oh, yes, they are. And usually they just notice, okay, just another cruise ship on order. But when the news came that Disney would order 2 more ships and then the third ship was added, that was quite interesting and quite important for all Papenburgers, because they remembered what they did just a few years ago. And for example, when the float out of Disney Dream and Disney Fantasy was, they had fireworks at the shipyard and on the ship itself, which is quite unique for Disney Cruise Line. And I think they do it on every cruise. Am I right?
They do it on all the Caribbean cruises. They have fireworks at sea. And then I think there's some restrictions. So in Alaska, they're not allowed to do it. And
okay.
Yeah, we did a cruise in Alaska, and then we did a cruise in Norway, and they did not have them there. I'm not sure about the Mediterranean cruises that they do, but I do know the ones down in the Caribbean, they have it on. And it's really actually pretty cool to watch.
Yeah, I would love to watch it once. But these are all the small things that make Disney Cruise Line quite special, also for a special customer for Meyer Werft. Yeah.
Well, I hope. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think the next 3 ships will also be special for Papenburg.
Let's talk about the float out then. That's kind of a special day for all of the workers there as the ship comes out. Do they? And I saw, and I tried to post a video on the Facebook page for those following the podcast of the float out of the Dream, I believe. Anyways, and it showed those fireworks. Is everybody invited that's been involved? Obviously, probably some people are working and some people can't go, but is that kind of a big day for people to come and watch that, the workers?
Yeah. Workers, for example, bring their family to show them what they had done the last 1.5 years. It's very important, yeah. And when the float out, it's actually most of the time on Saturdays or Sundays. So operation on the shipyard is usually not so busy on these days, and hundreds, thousands sometimes people gather around the parking lots and see it from the first row, how the ship float out from the covered dry dock centimeter by centimeter and yard by yard, to translate it for the US. And it takes around 1.5 hours to float it out, and then you do some tests in the harbor basin of the shipyard. And you always have hundreds or thousands of people watching it. Although it's not spectacular, it's slowly, of course it's spectacular because of the size of the ship, but nothing really happens.
Yeah, just because it's so slow.
Yeah, go on.
No, it just looked like kind of a fun day for people to kind of get together and maybe celebrate a little bit about what they've created. So being a guide at the visitor center and taking people through the tours, what are some of your favorite stories that you like to tell people as you take them through the tour that we haven't touched on maybe yet today?
Wow, that's a tough question. I never thought about it. Well, I like to talk to people about all these crazy things that are brought to cruise ships. Yeah, for example, the water slide, the water duck, I think it's called, with this cruise line, or the private island. People don't know that the cruise industry is such a crazy industry, let's put it like that. And for example, when I tell them about Norwegian Cruise Line, they have these studio cabins for single travelers, and they are all on one hall, and some of these single studio cabins have doors to be connected to the door next, or the cabin next door. And people always find it funny. Why should I, as a single traveler, want to get in touch with a single traveler next door? It's those stories. Or for example, Royal Caribbean with their internet system on the Quantum class ships, which is, I think, the fastest at sea. And when they had the press conference at the shipyard, actually, with Quantum being launched, the first ship of the series, they introduced this internet system, and part of the crew was watching in the building hall how the press conference was going on. And Richard Fain, the CEO of Royal Caribbean, said, well, we also want our crew members to participate and to profit from this high-speed internet system, and therefore we give you a free Microsoft tablet computer. And all the crew members, of course, were very, very happy about this news.
Oh, I bet.
And those are the small stories that I like to tell to visitors. Yeah.
Have you ever seen Bob Iger, the CEO from Disney? Has he come to Papenburg by any chance? I'm not sure if he has or not.
I'm pretty sure he's been to Papenburg, but I've never seen him there.
So I've got a couple other just different questions here before we finish up today. And just from your perspective, seeing all these different ships being built, what are some of the new things that are coming out maybe that those of us who've been on the ships that we don't know about? Or what are you seeing? What are some of the new design trends that you might be seeing on the ships coming out in the future? Well,
design trends there are several. For example, the so-called X-bow or crossbow is something new. You might have seen the Virgin Voyages rendering of their ship, or MSC cruises. They don't have the traditional form of the bow. That's quite long, but they actually, I don't know how to describe it in English. Actually,
I'm looking it up right now on the internet because I've seen the picture, but I'm not sure exactly what.
Yeah, it's quite unconventional. Maybe you can describe it a little better if you see the pictures. Yeah. That's definitely a design trend.
Okay, so what look, I just pulled it up on the internet, and what Florian is talking about, the bow of the ship, instead of kind of the point sticking out towards the front and then coming back underneath, it looks like, I believe, it almost looks like some of the ships from like the 1800s, where instead of the bow being in the front and then it coming back towards the ship, the bow is actually, I don't want to call it a bow, but the front of the ship is actually down in the water and it comes back towards the ship from above. And I'm not really doing a very good job of explaining that, but it's almost the opposite. The front of the ship actually looks the opposite of the way they do now.
Yeah, exactly. And the background is that this delivers more stability for the ship at slower speeds.
Okay.
And that's the background, yeah. Okay. So they have a technical background actually for this design. Another design trend, I think, is, or it's actually already existing, that more and more balcony cabins are being put on cruise ships. So, for example, at Meyer Werft, we on average build 75-80% of all cabins with balconies. Of course, it's dollars for the cruise lines because balcony cabins are more expensive.
Right. So what happens to the inner space, I guess, that used to be inner cabins now? Do the balconies just take up part of that space? I don't know how to ask the question. Does that make sense what I'm asking, I guess?
Two things that play a role here. Of course, balcony cabins take part of the space, but also you change the structure of the ship. The lower decks, let's say up to the 5th, 6th, 7th deck, you build a little bit wider. And then when you start the decks with balcony cabins, you get a little more tight. And then you can build higher ships with the same stability. And of course, if you have more decks, you can put more balcony cabins.
Okay. That totally makes sense. So by building it wider, it's giving more stability to build it higher. How about just entertainment options? What have you seen, or what do you see that's new? One of the questions we got from somebody was like, in the past, there's water slides and rock walls, and when I was in the Getaway, they had a ropes course, for those familiar with it, on the back of the ship. What kind of new entertainment options are you seeing people explore or think about?
Well, actually, the ropes course is already old stuff. On Norwegian Joy, which has been delivered in April, and Norwegian Bliss, that's being delivered next April, we have, instead of the ropes course, a go-kart track.
Oh, I did see that, yeah.
Electric go-karts, you can drive around. I think it's 250, 260 meters long, the track, and you can actually drive against someone else and have a little race. They're powered by electricity, so you can still enjoy the pool and read a little book.
so they're not super loud on the back,
And Norwegian Bliss will also have laser tag on board.
Okay.
But for example, for Norwegian Joy and the two ships that we built for Dream Cruises, so for the Asian markets, lots of virtual reality entertainment were installed the ship. For example, Norwegian Joy has a virtual reality roller coaster on board.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Did you get to? So is it kind of like a simulator where you're sitting in something that moves, and then you've got the virtual reality headset, or do you
exactly like that? Yeah.
Okay. Did you get to experience that by any chance?
Unfortunately not.
No.
I would have loved to do it, but no. No one allowed me to go on board.
Yeah, it sounds like fun.
So these are the crazy things that I already mentioned. Or for example, you don't have one single theater anymore, but maybe 2 or 3 ventures where you have shows going on the ship, and not one single show in the evening. That is also one thing that is already changing, but will change more in the future. So you have maybe your large theater, and then you have a small theater somewhere else on the ship, where a different show is being presented. Maybe a dinner show that comes at extra costs for you as a guest, for example.
Yeah, they had a Cirque du Soleil. Are you familiar with Cirque du Soleil?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Yeah, they did a Cirque du Soleil dinner show that we did on the Getaway, and that was a lot of fun. That was a really neat show, and it was a special theater, just like you said, that was specifically built for it, and that was really kind of a neat experience.
I'm getting a little jealous. I would love to try it as well.
There's a couple other questions for you. What about the dining rooms? In the past, the ships have kind of been built with large galleys that serve like 3 main dining rooms. Do you see, or have you seen anything where that might be changing, where it might be smaller galleys spread throughout the ship so that there's even more dining choices?
This is definitely a thing. Most of the ships still have 3 main dining rooms, but more and more different dining options across the ship. So, for example, Norwegian Bliss will have 28 dining options, and I think 22 or 23 of them are included. So you have the 3 main dining rooms with 1 galley, the main galley, and then you maybe have 1 galley in the middle of the ship serving smaller restaurants, maybe a burger restaurant or something, Italian restaurant or French restaurant, and then you have your specialty restaurants, and they usually have a dedicated galley as well. So you have usually 2, 3, 4 galleys for different restaurant locations.
Okay.
So most cruise lines don't have these seatings anymore in their restaurants. They say, well, our restaurant's open at 6 and closes at 9. Come whenever you want.
I kind of like that because it gives you kind of more of an option and kind of more of a choice at times. So, well, and then let's go back to just the size of the ships themselves. You know, with these, like the Bliss with 6,500 guests coming on board. Is the crew to guest ratio changing at all as far as technology comes in? I guess is technology within the ships, would you know, is that changing how many crew members are actually needed to operate the ship?
I just did a little research on that question and math.
Yeah, for the economic side for you, since you're kind of looking at that in school.
Exactly, yeah. We do look on these things. And actually, the crew guest ratio is getting better and lower because with more restaurants, for example, you have more waiters, more chefs, and so on, and you're on board, of course. But yes, robotics, for example, and virtual reality and artificial intelligence are things and trends in the tourism industry. And AIDA Cruises, for example, already have robots serving guests. So not serving dishes, but you can ask them, for example, when you arrive in the next port or something like this. This is really a thing. I think Princess Cruises has introduced the Ocean Medallion, something like this, that is actually, you can locate, it can locate yourself, and you just take out your app and order a drink, and it automatically knows where you are, and the waiter knows, okay, I have to bring it to this and this location on the ship.
Really?
So you don't have to go to a bar or the waiter has to come by. You just order and get your drink delivered. I hope this was explained quite well. I have not experienced it myself yet.
No, you explained it perfectly. That's kind of amazing. You could just be sitting in a seat anywhere on the ship, and then, I'd like to have a soda, and go ahead and order it, and the next thing you know, it shows up. That's kind of neat.
And I really like these things because it makes your voyage more convenient. And I always come back to Quantum Class of Royal Caribbean because I think these are the most technologically advanced, and I think we will see a lot of these things in the new Disney ships. They call the Quantum Class their smart ships. For example, they let you check in from home, just like when you check in for a flight. You make your own security photo with your webcam or your smartphone or whatever, and you get a QR code and get into the terminal, scan your QR code, drop off your luggage, and your luggage gets an RFID tag. So when it's brought to your cabin, you get a notification on your phone saying your luggage has been delivered to your cabin. So you don't have to check every 30 minutes if your luggage has arrived or not. And you can even get a wristband that makes your key card obsolete, your boarding card, because you can do all the things with your wristband. And I think this is going to be a game changer, or has been a game changer, because it just makes things so more convenient. I don't have to queue when I go into the terminal, and I exactly know I need maybe 10 minutes from my taxi to my cabin. And that's pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, that's amazing. I hadn't heard all the changes that they've made with Royal like that. That's going to be some fun technology for them to bring on with the new Disney ships and whatnot. So my last question, I guess, is who, in your opinion, and it probably sounds like Royal Caribbean, at least right now, is kind of pushing the envelope as far as new designs and new trends? Is there any one company, or is it just kind of the whole industry as one company does something, others follow, and then they improve upon it?
I think it's the latter. Yeah, all companies do innovation. Some do it in dining, some do it in technology, some do it in ship design. And what I notice is if one goes ahead and all the others notice, hey, this is a thing, they are successful with it, they follow. For example, AIDA Cruises, the AIDA Nova that will be delivered next year, ordered 2 ships at Maya Werft that are going to be powered with LNG, liquefied natural gas. So no more marine diesel or heavy oil. It's far more environmental friendly. And they were the first one to order these ships that are solely powered by LNG. There's no infrastructure for that in harbors and so on, so it will be challenging, I think, for them. But everyone else noticed, okay, this might be a good idea. So, for example, the new Disney ships will be powered by LNG. Royal Caribbean ordered ships at Meyer Turku in Finland, the sister company, also with LNG propulsion. Carnival ordered ships with LNG propulsion for different brands, P&O, Carnival, and so on. And this is, for example, one thing that spreads around the whole industry after one cruise line has tried it. And I think that's the same with many entertainment aspects, for example. So your restaurant variety. Norwegian Cruise Line has been on the top notch of restaurant and dining options. And after that, other cruise lines noticed, okay, people want to be flexible with dining and introduce the same concept to their brands and their ships. And I think this is going to be the same case with a lot of things, be it ropes courses, be it racetracks or bumper cars on board or whatever. Water slides has been the same with water slides, huh?
Yeah. So we went on the Magic has the Aqua Dunk, which is very similar to the water slides that they put on the Getaway, the ones where the trapdoor falls out and you go down. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a fun slide. So you kind of see that same kind of experiences across the different cruise lines. Well, excellent. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about as far as Meyer Werft comes, or anything with the cruise industry that you see changing that we haven't talked about tonight?
Oh, there were so many aspects. We could talk for another 5 hours.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed talking with you tonight, Florian. I hope you've had a good time coming on and speaking with our listeners.
Yeah, it was fun for me as well. And whenever there are questions about Meyer Werft or shipbuilding or the cruise industry, or whenever you find good research questions for my thesis, just let me know.
Oh, definitely. And if you're up for it, I'd love to have you come back on periodically to kind of give us updates on what's changing in the industry, and especially as we get closer to 2021 and the Disney company starts building their first ship.
Yeah, sure. We can do that. I would love to do that.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank you once again for coming on, Florian, and I wish you all the best as you continue your studies and everything
Thanks
that you
a lot.
have going on in Papenburg.
Thank you.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Well, that is going to wrap up tonight's show on the DCL podcast. We sure hope you enjoyed our quick cruise over to Papenburg, and I really want to say thank you to Florian once again for taking time out of his busy schedule to teach us all a little bit about the Meyer Werft company, shipbuilding, and kind of some of the history behind the Disney Dream and the Disney Fantasy. I know if you're like me, you're pretty excited about the 3 new ships coming, and just to be able to sail on 5 beautiful ships built by just an amazing company is truly an honor and a privilege. So once again, between now and then, if you'd like to reach out to us, you can reach us on Facebook at DCL Podcast. You can always get a hold of me on Twitter at DCL Podcast, and Christy as well on Twitter at PackYRPixieDust. And thank you to all of our listeners who come back. If you've enjoyed what you're hearing, we'd really appreciate it if you'd take time and leave us a review on iTunes. That helps us get the word out about the show to others. And between now and then, if you're heading out on your next trip or next adventure, all of us here at the DCL Podcast would like to wish you fair winds and safe journeys as you head out on your next adventure. Once again, thanks for coming back, and we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast.